Aloha, I'm Dazen Hakias. I'm the host of Healing with Aloha, located on the island of Kauai. On this podcast, we talk about grief, mental health, healing, and having passion in life. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Preston Zeller. He is a filmmaker and an artist, and he helps families in grief commemorate their loved ones through a personalized memorial painting. And so, with further ado, guys, this is Preston. Hi, Preston.
Hi, Deslin. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to finally have you. I'm glad we met last month and to finally have you as my guest.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've had some initial conversations and have been trying to do this for a while, so it's good to finally have it going.
So Preston, what led you to be able to do something so special as doing art to commemorate loved ones for families?
Yeah, so in 2019, I lost my own brother, and he was my older brother by about 4 years, and that of course kind of rocked my world. I had experienced loss before, but not quite something that impactful, and so it just got sent me down this path of initially going, you know how do I navigate grief, and I quickly realized that I think a lot of at least the things I was exposed to weren't, I didn't feel equipped to deal with the grief, and I happened to be an artist, and so I created this really long extensive project to process my own grief, at least in those early days, and give me kind of a way to deal with that grief. But um, out of that process, I realized that because it's like multi-year long, that this could be helpful for other people. I started exploring that notion and talking with other people who have experienced loss, and doing that in pretty large numbers, and realizing that it could be helpful. And so yeah, since then I've been able to do grief paintings for people, and it's been just amazing to see how my own experience there has actually translated to um, being able to extract these stories from people of who they lost, and then using my style that resonates with people, and turning that into a painting that like tells their own story. It's really kind of it's a cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I know you were telling me that you had done a documentary and then that's kind of like how it segued to you to be at this point. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you're able to convey your emotions and your feelings about your grief journey. And so then that helped you to identify with people because when they're looking through what you've done, then it sparked like something in them and it will allow them to talk about their grief that maybe they didn't for years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I've talked to so many people, of course, about like, you know, what that it is that I do there, and first of all, people when they kind of come across what I do, that many times haven't thought about art as being something that they can engage in as a therapeutic device, because you could of course, do your own painting, and you don't have to be an artist. You just kind of do this, free floating painting to work through your own emotions. But then, yeah, they'll the people who actually get to watch the documentary versus just going on Instagram or even reading on my site, they see how I've done that in a really kind of intimate way, and it opens up that door of like, oh, maybe this could be helpful, because otherwise it's very easy to I think get stuck in this box of just carrying the grief around and not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, because yeah, it's like having something that is like, okay, I'm gonna walk around holding it, and like you don't know where to put it down, and um, through art, it's your way of putting it down. Like some people
Mm,
journal, some people, they do therapy. Some people they go out into nature.
hmm.
And for what you do is like it's healing. It's another form of healing. It's being
Yeah.
able to connect.
Yeah. And, there are, as you were saying, because I know you're a creative person yourself and you have all sorts of outlets. And There are so many ways you can do it. I think in what, these paintings accomplish that maybe some other things don't is, first of all, trying to like visualize your grief in a way that you want to revisit is kind of a weird thing to navigate, right? Because and I remember we had this conversation, and I always ask someone this when I'm going through the process of explaining what I do, like, hey, what would prevent you from just doing this kind of painting on your own? And 99% of the time, it's just that like it's too painful or awkward to navigate it. And like, how do you translate that, right? It's like getting this objective sort of view of what your relationship was like with that person, because it's impossible to detach yourself from the intricacies of your relationship. And so and I just did actually a presentation for a client this morning where out of all the things in your life and all the things that tie you to someone, what's being distilled in your story to have something that you can look at and reflect on. And so when I present these paintings, I of course there's something that I find usually is a continual theme in someone's life and with their relationship with someone. And so that's how I have to approach the painting. So when we go through their story, we find, okay, well, here's this thing that again kept coming up and kept coming up. And so that's kind of what I hone in on. And so when I present the painting, I tell that story back to them, but with these like visual elements that are reflected in sort of my style, but just catered to their story. And it's really cool to see their reaction, because it's just like, I didn't know this was possible, but it is a collaboration at the end of the day, because I of course have to see like certain styles and whatnot that resonate with them, and colors of course, and shapes sometimes that remind them. And I also have to be, I'm learning a lot in this process too. I have to be very cognizant of how someone passed away. And I was actually talking with someone who, they had lost someone to suicide. And it was basically like a firearm suicide. And so anything that resembled too much of like a splattering effect was actually very off-putting. Well, yeah. I use that in certain techniques, right? And I remember having this call, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt kind of stupid for showing these examples, but so that in and of itself is like, avoiding certain techniques that might be like reminiscent of the way they died. In some cases that comes into play, some cases it doesn't, but yeah.
So a lot of it is like being sensitive and being aware too, like you said, for each individual person, as you're coming up with ideas and how to create the art that would be like the best way to represent their loved one without it being like triggering, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
in each situation.
Yeah, I mean, the goal, of course, is to have this painting be a sort of like reflective piece for them. And it may not always be a calming thing, but it's like, how do you tell the relationship and like all the aspects of it in a way that is going to be, I guess, insightful? Because everyone, especially these close relationships that really, wreck us for a period of time, there's a lot of bad mixed in with the good.
Yeah,
But
nobody has a perfect relationship.
right. But you don't want to look at a painting and just be like, think about all the times that you really didn't like the person.
Yeah.
You kind of want to look at it and feel, hopefully, that it's emblematic of kind of the totality of the relationship. And I'm finding more and more actually that a lot of that is based in childhood. And especially for like sibling loss is one, but even like parental loss, right? There's so like everything's sort of founded in those early stages, and the ones that have to do with family members anyways. And that's kind of like what it often comes back to. It's just the childhood relationship.
Yeah, I know that you when you did the documentary, you were able to incorporate a child psychologist to
Mm,
connect like with the art and with the child. Can you explain that?
yeah, sure. So she has actually Lindsay Lederman from Art Therapy Project. She actually had kind of a dual background. So she's been an art therapist formally for quite a long time, and they deal with like kind of people of all ages. But prior to that, yeah, she worked in hospitals for like terminally ill children in order to
Wow.
work with their families. So, I mean, that's talk about a heavy thing, but yeah, I brought in her to the documentary to bring in this, of course, clinical perspective. And, one of the things she kind of touches on is how, so much of what people are coming in for as an adult may not necessarily be like childhood trauma, but it happens earlier in life, right? Even in their 20s. And she has this quote she talks about where um, people come in their 70s and they're even in their 80s when they've experienced something in their 20s. So they're walking around with it and walking around with it. And in many ways, I think when you're addressing grief, and I'll just use myself for example, you're looking at the loss of like my brother. I had to go into my childhood eventually. I don't talk about it a ton in the film, but I had to go back into my childhood and go, what was my relationship like with him? And why is this death so impactful to me? Because it's beyond just, of course, the person being gone and even that adult relationship. There are all these things that person did to shape you. And
Hmm.
then all of a sudden, that person who shaped you is gone. And I think that's part of the reason why certain types of deaths or certain relationships when they're kind of cease to exist feel so empty or make you feel so empty is because they did shape you, and you can't like reference that growing point anymore. It's just gone. And so like, yeah, what do you do with that?
Yeah, especially if it's unexpected passing. If
Yeah.
there isn't that ability to, like when I was my grandparents, they went into hospice care, like I was able to grieve, but then prior to their passing, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
I was able to have that time knowing that it could be any moment now, but to be able to, but when it's something that's unexpected, then it's like it's just there's nothing. You know what I mean? Like and I think that pain makes it's a shock, you know.
Yeah. The abruptness of the death, and I think what you're describing too is that like anticipatory grief. And I think that in some cases could be more sneaky, the grief, because you've had this like lead up time to grieve, and you're like, well, I've already grieved by the time they're dead, and then something comes up, surfaces for you emotionally like 6 months or a year
Oh,
later, and you're
yeah.
and you're like, why do I feel this way?
Yeah, and it's because it's an ongoing journey. There's no
Yeah.
quick fix, and how someone is with one relationship doesn't mean it's going to be like that for someone else. And I think
Right.
everybody's at different stages, and just being able to understand that and have compassion for
Mm,
yourself and for other people, it's key.
yeah.
You
Yeah, 100%. And I'm curious, because you got to watch the documentary. What was like your key takeaway from watching it?
I just thought, wow, I wish I did something similar to that,
Mm,
because it, wa- it was like it was a heartfelt, um up close and personal, behind the scenes, seeing you go through it.
mm,
And just seeing the steps that you took to create, you know what I mean? It it was it brought up emotions and feelings, because
yeah.
it's not easy to deal with our feelings and our emotions. And I feel like the way you went about it, and the whole presentation of all 365 art
Mm,
pieces, I was like, wow,
Mm,
like, that's basically your heart, and you can
mm,
see the difference in your art style,
mm,
that it's it varies.
mhm,
And it just shows like that's kind of like how we are on a day to day. Like we're always transforming and changing. And as much as we want to stay positive or we want to feel good, we won't. And it's
mm,
okay kind of thing. I think that's what I came to understand with the documentary. It's that it's personal, and it's not gonna be easy, but you have to give yourself permission to acknowledge and transition.
mm,
I mean, but if you're just used to not thinking or feeling, something like that, it's like overwhelming because
mhm,
it's not something that people do. But I think it's something that we need to consider, like
mm,
finding something to allow us to express yourself, like if you're not into art or whatnot, but just giving yourself that. I mean, I think it was something that was really courageous, but I can see why it was also healing.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, there's thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's any of these creative things that you go down that force you to like tap in all your your emotions, like whatever it is, writing and anything therapeutic. I think it's scary for a lot of people, which it kind of just goes back to the whole like I think reason why this podcast exists and so many others, and just like it's so great now that people are wanting to kind of surface it more. That why is it that you have to kind of like experience this grief to go and be equipped to deal with it? It's a very sort of bizarre, it's almost like we don't get like financial training when we're in school, right? You have to go like get a credit card and get in debt, and then
And
like
realize like I'm not good
you
at it.
know be on the verge of bankruptcy before you go, oh. you know?
Not a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. But grief is kind of like that, you're like, you're kind of like emotionally bankrupt in a way. And but there's no reset for that. It's like, oh wait, it all just has to like come out. Whereas how's that going to come out? That's sort of the big question, I think, for most people.
Yeah, and like you said, like we weren't taught how to deal with grief, and how you handle your grief and your other family members is going to be different. And like
Mm,
what I find like with um having discussions with other people is some people don't want to talk about it. They
yeah.
You're the one who's open to talking through your feelings, emotion, and other people are like, nope, don't want to
Hmm.
go there, and so just being able to know who you can go to and who you can't is important.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating too, I think, as you have realizations about relationship you had with whatever person it was. And I think oftentimes family members, where it's the most sort of dicey to navigate, you start shifting your perspective about who they were, and who you are in light of that, and you share those things with the family. And I think there's inevitably, I've found some, like the majority of the family holds this person in reverence, and kind of like saying anything other than the really starry-eyed view of them is sort of like an anathema to the coping process. And so if you come back and say, hey, I really thought that this person was a different way. I mean, I experienced some of this with my brother, but and hearing other people talk about it sort of like begins to ostracize you a bit, because they're like, they don't get it, or that's it's too uncomfortable to address them a certain way. That's very, very bizarre navigating those dynamics. So I don't know if you experienced any of that yourself, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dynamics. There's a lot of truth to things. However, I've learned to have compassion and understand that some people for their own personal preference and wellness, that they would rather hold their idea to this
Yeah.
than to what could be, another like aspect of the person,
Mm,
and so just learning to let go,
hmm.
and just not, like you said, not trying to, it's not meant to bring up pain for other people,
Hmm.
but just knowing, this is not something that they're ready for, they want to go, and then you just finding other people who are supportive.
Yeah, I mean, that again is why, partially why these, I think, paintings are so helpful for people, is they get something kind of that, maybe don't feel like anyone can really identify with their path in the grief process. And so it's like, you know who can you engage on that with, who's not going to like judge where you're coming from, which is hard, right? When you're sharing those stories, usually we want to kind of go, I'm pretty sure my perspective of things is the right one. It's easy to fall into that. So yeah, you're getting something out of it that you're like, oh, okay, like this is my personal thing that I get to keep going back to. Yeah, so it's just it is I think what you said about having compassion for other people's kind of viewpoints is really good.
Yeah, I think like everybody has like a level of capacity
Mm,
that they can process,
mm-hmm.
and so for some people it's like it is this long.
Right, right.
And so it's
Yeah,
like, and so I think, like you said, being able to do these art for people, it helps them because it's not so restricted, because
mm,
you're you're just basically being like the medium. I mean,
yeah,
even though you're using art as a medium, right? um
yeah,
but they're able to convey through you their thoughts and feelings about it,
yeah.
and maybe to someone else it's abstract art, but to them it conveys what they intended.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually interesting when I, get to share certain ones in social, and people go, "Oh, that looks like this." They're just looking at it from its aesthetic quality. I'm
Like
like,
literally, yeah.
yeah, I'm like, there's a whole story to it that like nobody's gonna understand, but that's okay. So, yeah,
Well,
but
and then it's like it's there's no sense in to truly like trying to explain it, because like you said, it's so multi-layered.
yeah, and I kind of, maybe I'll give like a little background of like the person, if they're okay with me sharing it. But yeah, you're right. It is very multi-layered, and there's really no sense in trying to, at least I don't know, maybe that's something to try. In some ways though, I want to empower the people who get it more so to put it on their own socials if they want, and say, hey, this is what it means to me. But I there was someone recently who they got it, and they started pointing out all these different kind of like animal figures in it that I hadn't seen. And it was just reminding them even more of the person they lost. And I'm like, oh, that's so trippy, because I had one way of presenting it, and they're like, yeah, but there's this, and this. I'm like, oh, there you go. That's the part of the whole point.
But that's interesting because, like you said, when you did the art, there's no intentions, right?
Yeah.
But that they were able to interpret. Sorry, I'm on an island, and this rooster is literally going back and forth between one house to the other. I'm like, during this, I
It's
apologize.
Hawaii. It's totally understandable.
I'm on an island, guys. This rooster is on a mission.
uh,
But no, I think, yeah, like it's amazing in a sense that you don't realize what you're doing, but how, because of the person like having that connection, that they're
mhm.
able to extract things that you're like, really, that you
Yeah.
you have to like double take on your art.
Well, and that was, so like this, I'll explain for people listening who may not understand it. The style I do is like intuitive abstract. So, when I was going through my year of painting, it was just going with the flow and feeling it. And so in doing that, sometimes things just like unconsciously come out. And I kind of strive for the same effect when doing other people's paintings as well. So I'll review. I take like really extensive notes when we're going over someone in an exploratory session, going over someone's story. And I read that like, several times. And then before each painting session, I'll kind of review it again. And I'm not going to say there's like a science to it by any means. It's just like how do you feel something as much as possible, but also be kind of like intentional about it. And those are kind of hard things to navigate as well, because when you're being overly critical of what you're doing, and this is partially why I like this style, it kind of can stunt creativity, which is why most people after like, your single digit years in life, you just start to get like kind of give up on it because you're afraid of the criticism from yourself or from other people or whatever the case is. But yeah, I'm always like, when I just started painting, I'm like, I don't know where this is going to go. Like really at all. I have to like trust that what I've been doing is going to come out right. And, so far it's been great.
Yeah, like trusting the process, because like you said, you don't know. And I find that when it comes to art, the things that as an artist, like you think is like, I don't know if I like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is the very thing people love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like you almost have to like defy your own doubts,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because it's 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 personal, like it's perspective, you know what I mean? Like, and sometimes we're our worst critics, so that's why even more so we just have to let it go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That and that's I think such a preferable place to be in to me, where you can be living in a sort of creative space and just doing what sort of feels good in the moment. And in that way, you're actually, I think, in many ways tapping into a lot more that's kind of going on inside your brain, especially from a grief standpoint, because we do store so much, especially emotionally. And what does that even look like to come out? And that again is the fear from maybe talking it out perspective. So these things that don't require that is kind of the key.
No, yeah, totally. I had a question. So did you do,
Yeah.
I know because of COVID and whatnot, were you able to release a documentary, or did you guys push it back?
Oh, good question. So we finished it officially basically in like December of last year, so 2021. And we had started entering early cuts into film festivals. I think that was kind of, in retrospect, not a great idea because there's so much that shapes up in the last like 10% of editing. But
Mhm.
yeah, so where we're at now, so it's like what, April 8th today, 2022. We're still shopping distributors. It's kind of been slow going in the beginning of the year because it's a big festival season
Yeah.
in terms of big festivals. So a lot of distributors are kind of preoccupied with that. But in the meantime, what we've been doing is doing a lot of private screenings. So like even, such as yourself, there have been some like grief groups that we've done private screenings for on Facebook. We're involved with it's oddly enough, the Art of Grieving exhibit in the UK. So same name as the film, which is the Art of Grieving. That's like a 2-month exhibit in England, right outside of London. And so we're gonna actually have like a physical UK premiere in
Wow.
there. Yeah, which will be really cool. It's like a 300-person theater or something like that. And we're going to do like a live Zoom Q&A. So I won't be there physically, but
Oh, okay.
so
So
I'll be like our
there.
UK premiere. And then we're gonna do something really soon where we're gonna do probably like a 100 person like screening giveaway, but in exchange we're gonna basically have people do like a selfie video after that says like what they learned from the video, from the film. So we're kind of getting creative with ways we can share it in the meantime, absent of like our formal like kind of distribution timeline. So it's just such a process I'm learning as you make anything film related. The distribution is like, it's a whole nother deal. So
Yeah, easier said than done.
for sure. Yeah. No, but I appreciate you asking because we feel like we're just, I will say like the people who have seen it, who've experienced loss, like just been a really cool response that's like definitely validating of uh, the film for sure, but I think just its potential to kind of open people's eyes to creative processes. Because a lot of people have said, I didn't know painting was an option. I have never thought about being creative to work through my grief. And then they've sought out art therapists. They've gone and bought stuff and like messaged me about it. I'm like, and by stuff, I mean painting materials. Like that's really part of the goal is just getting people to, maybe think about differently how they process their grief.
Yeah, no, totally. And what I'm finding is there's no one way to
Yeah.
be to utilize art. I think sometimes we want it to be like other people, but it's all personal. And like for me, if I don't know what to draw, I do hearts. And I
Mm,
just do different color, different shape hearts. You know what I mean? And it's not nothing fancy, but it's just expressing, like it's just getting it out kind of
hmm.
Oh,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know you do a variety of different things, right? I mean, other than this show, of course.
yes. And it's just I think, being able to express yourself authentically, that's what has been like grounding and healing. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It's just being in nature and not doing anything, just giving yourself that space.
mm, that's good. Well, I mean, you do live in a quite beautiful place by
Yeah,
comparison
I'm
to
on an island.
many other places. So you're kind of living the dream every day from that standpoint.
Well, Preston, I'm so grateful for this time that I can have with you. What is the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah. So Instagram, just Preston Zeller is my tag there. If you want to learn more about the paintings, that's zellerhouseart.com. And the film is called The Art of Grieving. So if you go to theartofgrievingfilm.com, you can learn more about the film and sign up for updates and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me, guys. Thank you so much, Preston. You are teaching people to be able to convey your grief and not feel like you have to walk around holding it, but
Mm,
that you can give it an outlet that it's an ongoing process and that you don't have to feel like you're alone in it. And so, guys, thank you for joining us here with Healing with Aloha podcast. You can subscribe to us here on Spotify, and you guys have a grateful and beautiful day. Aloha.